Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. And folks, boy, do we have a lot to cover on today's program. We are just 11 days away from that monumental period in our nation's relatively brief yet illustrious history where the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, head to the ballot box to make their ultimate determination as to whom they believe is best qualified to be the next president of these United States of America. But it really does tie into a message or a story that's come out of Yale University. At the corner blog there at National Review, they've come out with a piece in which they said that those who have been interviewed, those students at Yale University, that ivory tower of academia, and higher learning, have said that conservatives are not welcome. That is what conservative students have said. That's also what left-leaning students have said as well. And what I think this shows above all else is that our institutions of education have gone away from being an all-inclusive, free, open marketplace of ideas where thoughts are freely exchanged and people are allowed to express themselves into a sort of authoritarian or totalitarian think tank in which they try and force you by derision and force and duress to assimilate to their way of thinking. It's either their way or the highway. And what comes to mind for me is my journey through undergraduate studies some 12 years ago, in which I had a history professor, because for those of you who don't know, I majored in history and minored in pre-law back in college, that I had a professor who literally went forth and said that the father of our nation, George Washington, was basically illiterate. Now, folks, this is simply not the case. It is intellectually disingenuous for my professor to have gone forth and made such an unfounded statement, because during the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as it was known in Europe, George Washington was one of America's principal and primary military strategists and tacticians, and his memoirs were beautifully, damn near poetically written, and it was highly consumed within the 13 colonies, second only to the Bible. And so what I did is I started to recite some of his memoirs to the professor, and then I told the professor, "Isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that writing beautiful?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Do you know who wrote it?" And he had to admit in front of the class that he did not. I said that it was George Washington. I then asked the professor if he wished to basically rephrase the statement that he had made, that intellectually disingenuous fluff that he had tried to spoon feed the class and have us accept it as though it were solid fact, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. He was highly embarrassed, and that goes to show what we have to do as a political movement, philosophy, and ideology in the face of this sort of tyrannical oppression that is reigning supreme throughout our institutions of higher education from coast to coast and border to border. What it really amounts to, though, is that they have been a very, very lockstep type of mentality, where it's either their way or the highway. And it's just disgusting, because it shows that they will do anything to press their agenda. They will ignore the truth whenever and wherever possible when they think that it is detrimental to the goals that they have set for themselves. It's as the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard back in the 1950s and 60s, that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists were, in that work, exploiting the School of Economics set by John Maynard Keynes, who literally was a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist and deviant, to essentially infiltrate and infect the upper pillars of society via education with the venom that is socialism. Now, folks, socialism cannot, of its own nature or fruition, compete in the free marketplace of ideas. The reason being for this is that socialism is theft by any other name. They cannot freely compete because no one in their right mind or with a modicum of sanity would ever accept that for themselves or for anyone else. It goes completely against all that we hold near and dear, both as a nation and as a people. But you see, what the Fabian socialists have been so successful with, folks, and something that we as a political movement in the true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists have not been all that successful with, is essentially breaking these people down, being able to break through the stranglehold that they've managed to grab with respect to our institutions of education. And what really is frustrating about this is that they are able to do it at all levels of education. They have it at primary level of education. They have infiltrated secondary level of education, all the way through postgraduate studies. And as a result, we have generation after successive generation that has not been truly exposed to the real and accurate history of these United States of America. And yes, folks, that is by design. Now, what's so shocking about this National Review piece is that even the liberal students, or those who self-identify as either liberal or very liberal, have gone forth and said that conservatives are not welcome to freely express their opinions on campus. So what that means is when you have these young minds stepping onto the ivory towers perimeter, they are forced to acquiesce to a singular way of thought, a singular approach to the way the world works and the way that they are basically allowed to think, and are essentially shamed if they do not fall in line or in lockstep with this frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist propagandistic agenda. And we see that it's hitting us from popular culture, it's hitting us from education, and yes, it is hitting us from within our government as well. And unless and until we begin to really address this, these problems are going to only accelerate exponentially. And I wish that weren't the case, and it really is that they are the ones that have pushed us to this position. But there is nothing that I can say that is of comfort and solace with respect to this. Conservatives have essentially been chased out of academia. It's very difficult for conservative professors to even get tenure. They want there to be a monolithic line of thought while they go out in intellectually disingenuous form and fashion and claim to be the agents of diversity and of tolerance. But there is no more of an intolerant lot in modern America than what we find in modern America's collegiate campuses. Think back to what occurred during the summer of political correctness, that is, the summer of 2015. After that jackwad, Dylan Storm Roof went up and shot up that African Methodist Episcopal Church, the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. We saw an just torrent of attacks on all things Southern because he managed to get a photo out to the media, or the media dug up a photograph of him standing there with the Southern Cross battle flag, or the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, what many people erroneously misname as the Confederate flag. And what happened in the immediate aftermath of that was just this knee-jerk emotional response. Recall that one of the things that my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is that if you allow yourselves to just be whipped up into a truly rawly emotional frenzy, the whole thing of what they do is then manipulate people. They then seek to use any and every crisis to push forward the agenda that they have. And that just cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. The reason it can't be allowed to go unchallenged is that it is literally beginning to tear this nation apart at its societal fabric and seams. Of course, that is exactly what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists desire above all else. They want to completely, holistically, fundamentally, and dare I say irreparably transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some unwelcoming Fabian socialist agenda. And that is just not going to work. And what we have to take away from it all is that we as a political movement have got to find a way to reach out to the minds who might necessarily or normally disagree with us because of this sort of societal infiltration. Conservatives just have not been all that successful in getting their message across. We see that there's already those in the rank and file of the supposed alt-right or alternative right who are saying that it is time for social conservatives to just shut their yaps, get in line, and enjoy this new definition of quote-unquote conservatism that they're wanting to unleash upon us. And they are really disgusting in what they are doing because they are buying into the same tribalism or identity politics that have become a cultural staple of the left. It's an attempt to essentially attack what we stand for and value, both as a nation and as a people. And what it all means to me is that we have been unsuccessful in getting our message across, that we have allowed through this mistaken notion of live and let live, or what I refer to as detente, because that is literally what detente means, that we thought that if we just let them be, if we left them alone, that they would allow us to go our way and that they wouldn't attack our way of life. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We have seen exactly what it is that they have been working towards for well over a century and a half now, and it is time that we draw a line in the sand demarcating that this is the deadline which they dare not cross. You know where the term deadline actually comes from? It's an old military term. It says that if you cross this line, you will be shot dead. That is where it comes from, and that is sort of the type of mentality we have to take, because they have certainly taken a mentality of it is either their way or the highway, or they will ostracize and attack, belittle, besmirch, and just generally shame those who don't agree with them. It's sort of the same mindset and mentality that existed during the dark days of the Soviet Union, particularly under Joseph Stalin. What happened during that time frame was that anyone who refused to toe the party line had to go to the gulag in order to receive re-education. In other words, anyone who disagreed with the party line was essentially someone who was mentally ill, mentally unstable, unfit to even be a contributing member of society. That is the same type of nonsensical drivel that comes out of the frothing of the mouth left. And it really is something that's bad, but they don't care. They want to rewrite our history, to obfuscate the truth. It's exactly what they do. And of course, we have to try and find a way to penetrate past that, to infiltrate their ranks and to bring a modicum of sanity back to the American system of polity. It's really a sickening thing to see that they are preaching a message that has no connection with modern society. It literally has no connection with modern American society. And I can't believe that that is why or what they are pushing. The reason why they are pushing it, of course, is they are hoping to pit American citizen against American citizen by utilizing the tried and true, albeit threadbare tactics and strategies of divide and conquer. They think that by pitting American citizen against American citizen, that we will tear out each other's jugular, thereby bleeding the nation to the point of anemia. When the nation is anemic, then they can work on their attempts to fundamentally transform the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. That has been their dark and diabolical twisted goals and machinations for well over 150 plus years now, folks. And think of it this way. It's what Kat Sunstein said. He said, never allow a tragedy or crisis to go to waste. They will use any opportunity to politicize any event, whether that is socially acceptable or not, in order to advance their agenda. We saw that they did it with the Umpqua Community College shooting. We see that they do it with terrorist attacks. They have done it at any available and given opportunity, and it is all about forwarding or fronting their agenda come hell or high water. Now, is this really the way that the United States of America is meant to operate? I think that the answer to this rather rhetorical question is both open and obvious. No, that is not the way that a true, open, honest, but above all free society operates. But they don't care what happens here. And what really comes down to all of this is that we must make a stance now, folks. It is our turn to actually literally stand up and say, enough is enough, because no one else can save us. That has been the dilemma of this entire 2016 presidential election cycle. Far too many people have looked up to the system of polity, looking for a messianic figure to come down from providence above to uplift them and save them from their own troubles, worries, and concerns. But the problem that we have with this is when you go back to the foundational documents of these United States of America, you shouldn't be looking for a messianic figure, because the only ones who are capable of saving this nation are we the people. That is inherently in the design. When you look at the opening lines to the preamble of our shared United States Constitution, you see that it says, we the people, in order to establish a more perfect union, to secure the domestic tranquility, and to basically promote the blessings of liberty. That is meaning that we own this government. No one else does. No one else has the right to take that away from us. And then when you consider the old adage that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men, it means that equal protection under the law is a true applicable thing. It is something that we cannot merely ignore or try to sweep under the rug. But by embracing identity politics, whether you be a member of the alternative or alt-right or of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist, is diametrically opposed to who we are and what we are, both as a nation and as a people. Now, while this may sound so abstract, what it shows, particularly with respect to the up-and-coming generations that are being indoctrinated in the ivory tower of academia, is that this sort of just disingenuous fluff that is being peddled as true and articulate knowledge is literally hampering our nation. It is making our people more docile. It is making sure that we don't truly understand the natural law tenets, which by their very nature are timeless, meaning that they're just as applicable today as they were at the inception of this nation some 235 plus years ago, as God willing they will be 235 years from today. Why is that? Because if you can make the government just an all-controlling force, and if you can have them try and be the ones that have handed down rights, or if you can make the population believe that their rights are endowed to them not by their creator, the God of nature himself, but by the government, then that means that the government can take those rights away. And we've seen that they've tried to do that, and we see also that they are going to try and use any opportunity to say that the Constitution is some quaint and antiquated document, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. Because if we literally believe that the Constitution is based on the natural law tenets, which, as I mentioned, are immutable or timeless, that means that the Constitution will always be applicable, just as it was in the beginning. And if society has changed to a degree where the letter of the law or the clear and concise language within the four corners of our shared Constitution need to change, then Article 5 provides us an avenue by which we can amend the Constitution. And literally what that means is that our founding fathers were blessed with damn near infinite wisdom and foresight. They understood that the people are the ones that control everything, that we are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. In fact, the way that the tenets of federalism work is that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, have delegated a certain amount of political authority and power to the government, and it is contractually controlled by the greatest contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. And that is that we are free. But if the government violates the terms of that contract, that is exactly what happens. They are in breach of contract. And then that government becomes rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate. And that's where we find ourselves today. And it really has shown how destructive these forces, these nefarious forces, are. The frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are wanting to control the narrative. They've done it through their allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They've done it in our institutions of education, and they are doubling down on their efforts to holistically redefine us, to irreparably redefine us, transforming us away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist dystopia. And folks, if we stop and think about this with a modicum of objectivity, we see that there is a bit of an Orwellian aspect to this. Because in his magnus opus of 1984, George Orwell spoke about how those who went astray from the government line or the party line of Big Brother, which was his euphemism for the central government, then they were forced to be re-educated. That goes into this type of gulag thinking that was predominant in Soviet Russia. We in the United States are better than that. We demand better than that, and we deserve better than that. Unfortunately, because there is such drastic polarization, particularly in our ivory towers, where people are made to feel ashamed of who they are, that is when you can see an electorate that is ripe to be manipulated and controlled by an unscrupulous charlatan or con man or snake oil salesman. That is how we have seen the bizarre ascension of the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian, as well as gutless opposition party or GOP presidential nominee Donald J. Trump take the reins of political power of the Republican Party in this fiasco of a 2016 presidential election cycle. He exploited the raw emotionalism and anger that has come from a group that feels they have no voice in modern America. That is the danger of identity politics, and it reminds me of why the father of our country, George Washington, stated in his farewell address that we should be well to avoid breaking into competing, disparate factions because we begin to lose sight of the overarching picture of what unifies us both as a nation and as a people. Of course, what he was speaking to was none other than our shared United States Constitution. These things are not taught anymore. And it's gone away from even having the deep impact and meaning of a political philosophy into something much worse. What it has transformed itself into now is just disagreeing with them in any form, shape, or facet. Recall that with respect to Obamacare, as we know that the alleged Affordable Care Act is proving to be anything but affordable, that Jonathan Gruber, went out and said that the bill could never pass without relying upon the stupidity of the American voters and lying to them. This is the mentality that they take. It is an insulting mentality, and one that truly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of these United States of America. Unless and until we, as true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists, begin to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity and proactively resist and push these people back, these problems, and indeed the very death spin that currently plagues, ails, and afflicts this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, will only continue and will only worsen and accelerate exponentially. That is why we must be very cognizant of what is happening around us. And again, it explains why my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that it is of the utmost importance that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding not only of our shared United States Constitution, but also our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. I know that it is far easier said than done, but it must be done. No one else is going to be able to save this nation. By the very design of this nation, it is up to we the people to do that. In other words, we are blessed with the blessings of liberty, but with every right and liberty, there couches an equal and just as important duty or obligation or responsibility, which is in the grand scheme of things that we must proactively maintain and safeguard those fundamental and inalienable rights. And that means that we must also realize that government did not give them to us. You see, the end game of what they are literally pushing for here, folks, is to try and to strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable rights. They want us to believe that the government will be our caretaker for the rest of our lives. And I don't believe that this is the way that we are going to place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. The only way that we can hope to place the nation back onto the path to prosperity is to begin to hold people accountable for their words, deeds, and actions. And that means holding college professors accountable just as much as college students. It means that we have to hold the media accountable. It means that we have to hold our pillars of society accountable. But above all, when you look at the natural order of things, or what is known in general parlance as the natural law tenets, something that can be universally understood through the application of logic and reason, then we ultimately must hold ourselves accountable as well. That is not necessarily an easy message to be heard, but it is one that must be heard. Because when we hold ourselves accountable, that is when we recognize what is right and wrong. You see, the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism have been wielded as weapons to diametrically harm and fundamentally transform our nation away from the constitutionally endowed Federalist Representative Republic to their frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist agenda and dystopia. That cannot be allowed to come to fruition. The only ones who can bring this nation back to peak performance. In other words, restore it to the path of prosperity is we the people. Unfortunately, that is not the message that we are hearing on our college campuses from coast to coast and border to border. And it is certainly not the message we hear being conveyed by the two mainstay political parties' nominees for the highest office in the land. And I believe that that is a travesty and tragedy of the worst order. Keeping in line with this campus fiasco and nightmare that is gripping the modern American undergraduate campus and indeed graduate campus as well, there's been a report out of College Reform in which they show that there is this movement in order for one to have permission before one can speak freely on our college campuses. Now, this is completely antithetical towards the notion of a liberal arts education. The whole purpose behind a liberal arts degree is to create a well-rounded student that is capable of discussing with those who disagree with them without necessarily going to blows. You see, it's this type of intolerance, this closed-mindedness that the entire purpose of academia was originated to dispel. If you recall, the entire purpose of the academy and the history of it traces itself back to ancient Greece with the philosopher Plato, and then again with Aristotle, with the academies that they formed. And even back then, the notion of spreading knowledge was a controversial thing. Recall that Plato was forced to consume poison hemlock when he was accused of perverting the youth of Athens. Well, you see, that's kind of the situation that we're facing now, except that in this era, it is the professors refusing to accept divergent or diverging opinions, which is completely antithetical to what a liberal arts degree is all about. That's part of the problem that we're facing in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. The frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, through the guise of historical revisionism, as well as using the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, have gone out on a limb here to essentially strip and deprive us of the freedom of expression. The entire purpose behind that is in order to advocate their ideology, which, as I mentioned in the previous segment and indeed on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer has no place in an open and honest society and cannot compete in the free marketplace of ideas. Therefore, they have to use duress and force in order to make people accept their dark and twisted machinations. It's really kind of a staggering and shocking thing to see that there has been this push to say that campus policies, including this one that I believe it was at Middlesex University, in which it says that campus reform, a project of the Leadership Institute, is America's leading blah, 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 blah. Basically, it was Middlesex University, and they're pointing to how there is this now push to have it to where you have to seek permission from the college administration in order to speak your mind, in order to protest. Now, yes, it is true under constitutional law and First Amendment protections. If you are in public places, you have to get a license in order to do it, but it does not mean that college campuses should clamp down on certain types of expression. And this, coupled with what we have seen with respect to that study that came out in the Yale Daily News, saying that conservative students do not feel free to express their political ideology or opinion, whether it be on campus or in the classroom, that is something that should be sounding alarm bells for every decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizen, because it shows that these institutions of learning, which are, as I mentioned earlier, to help create well-rounded individuals, are being used to suppress knowledge and information. It's being used to ostracize a particular portion of society, which it was never originally intended to do. of course, the way that we bring this back into scope, the way that we bring a modicum of sanity back to our institutions of education is for us to be proactive, for us to put our foots down and say, no, enough is enough. This is particularly the case when the institutions are state-run institutions, such as your public colleges and universities. But it really is kind of a dark territory that we're facing here. This idea that with generation after successive generation, that there has been this push to silence or to completely ostracize a particular method of thought or ideology, it shows that we have our work cut out for ourselves. You see, they are the ones that are trying to paint us as some sort of Paleolithic or antiquated group that is just mired with barbarism. Yet they tell us to open our arms to Islamic fascism that has been plaguing this nation. They tell us that climate change is real and that if anyone disagrees with climate change, then they ought to be arrested. Does this sound like a free exchange of ideas? Does this sound like an environment that is conducive to learning, that is welcoming to opposing points of view? The answer to this rather rhetorical question should be both open and obvious. No, it is not reflective of that. No, it does not represent that sort of conducive environment for education and learning, as well as expanding upon the horizons of the up-and-coming generation. These are the sorts of things that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been working towards for well over a century and a half now, folks. They are clamping down with a vice-like grip on our ability to express ourselves freely. They do not want us to be able to think for ourselves. And I've actually got a video that I'm going to key up here, folks, because I think it's just so important that we focus on this and have a chance to explore it so that we can then discuss it in greater detail. Because literally what we are facing here is something that I don't think should be welcome in any part of the United States. It's something that is dangerous, intellectually disingenuous, and when colleges are as expensive as they are now, I think that we need to seriously ask ourselves what it is that these people are doing.
You know, we do have a policy on campus about picketing. For any protests, you have to speak to student activities first, get it approved.
I don't have to. It's public campus. It's my civil liberties.
It has to be approved.
It's my civil liberty public campus.
It has to be approved.
My civil liberties trump states.
It has to be approved.
It does not, though.
Yes, it does. If I get a copy of the policy and I show it to you,
Well, it doesn't matter.
will you stand with me and read it?
Oh, I will read it. Yes,
You
sir.
will read it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for now, any sign that has the F word on it, that's vulgar. I want it flipped around.
Well, that you're
Anything that says
you're censoring free speech. Then.
You don't think that's inappropriate?
I do not. It's free
You
speech.
do not. Okay, I'm going to get a copy of the policy. You
Yes,
hang
sir.
tight here.
Yes, sir. I'll not leave it anywhere.
Big problem for me is the vulgarity on the signs,
Okay.
not necessarily the signs themselves.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to get the college policy. We're going to look at the college policy
Okay.
and determine whether you're in violation of the college policy. or
Okay.
not.
Now,
Okay.
here's my question.
Now, there's something that we need to take away from that. Yes, I have been speaking towards conservative mindsets and ideologies that have been attacked, but what we see here is that there is a push not just to essentially quiet a line of thought, but it's the vulgarity. Now, yes, there has been a push with the First Amendment to say that certain types of speech are not protected, and those that have no value to society, such as vulgarity and things of that nature, do not enjoy First Amendment protection. And I think that what the school is attempting to do here is to try and say that, look, we just find the content of the sign vulgar. Well, okay, but here's the problem I have. It's when they start saying that you can't express a certain political ideology or a political philosophy, which we have seen come to the forefront and to the foray more often than not, that is when you cross a line. content neutral must be an aspect of any type of restriction on free speech. And again, what it's showing here is you still have to have some type of permission. But here's what I get. It's that there are professors that go out and speak vulgarity. There are certain types of speech, quote unquote, that are protected that are vulgar, such as rap music. We've all heard the atrocious lyrics that have been part of the rap and hip hop culture for decades now, and that is allowed to go forward. So I do understand where these students are coming from and why they would be feeling upset, and as though that the colleges are going out of their way to censor certain types of speech. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play just a little bit more of that clip so that we hear kind of the environment that has been brewing on our campuses for far too long now. And again, it requires that we think about what it is that our nation is going through and what it is that college campuses are meant for. And then we have to, again, consider how it is that we reached the position that we have now and gotten to what it is that has been problematic. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and cue it up and continue playing.
This is a public campus, correct? And is run by the county,
Yep.
which is subjugated to the government Bill of Rights, which they cannot censor my First Amendment right. They can't.
Well, but while you're on college,
unconstitutional.
while you're on college property, you are governed by the rules and regulations of the college.
But it's public property, though.
Well, you're governed by the rules and regulations of the college.
But that's unconstitutional.
You're governed by the rules and regulations of the college, just like you're governed by the rules and regulations of the town you may go to every case might be. It's no different. You're within the confines of the college. That's why with college, we close the college at 11 p.m., right?
State law?
What's that? Right now, we're talking about college rules and regulations.
Right. All I'm saying is, so this is a college, community college. It is run by the county,
Yep.
correct? And then this will be a county ordinance, correct?
No, it would be a college.
So it's strictly to the college,
You're correct.
which is governed by the county, which is a member of the government.
So what he is getting at there is he's trying to say, look, what you're talking about there are college basic rules and regulations. And he's trying to say that the college regulations and rules cannot supersede the Constitution. And in that aspect, he's right. In that aspect, it is the college or the institution trying to take primacy over the Constitution. They cannot do that. Pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of our shared United States Constitution, what is known in common parlance as the Supremacy Clause, it is our Constitution itself that constitutes the supreme law of the land. This is the type of willy-nilly divorcing and distancing from the scriptures of our law that is leading us into a very lawless type of situation. When you stop and think about this in an objective fashion, you have to recall that the United States of America, as the old adage goes, is a nation of laws and not of men. In other words, the law is meant to apply equally across the board. These colleges, much like local municipalities and counties, are attempting to whittle away at constitutional protections. Now, one of the great misnomers of legal education and parlance in these United States of America is that there has been this discussion that the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, do not apply to the state governments, except that they do, in that the state governments had to ratify them by sending delegates up to vote on and to pass by 3/4 of the state, as is a prerequisite of the Fifth Amendment, or not Fifth Amendment, but Article 5 of our shared United States Constitution. By ratifying these amendments, essentially, the state governments are acquiescing to adhere to and abide by the laws. Now, what is interesting is there is a bifurcated system, meaning that under the tenets of federalism, the states have their own individual state constitutions. Now, what happens with the constitutions of the several states is they can give more protection to our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights than the federal Constitution, but they cannot abridge or encroach upon it. However, the way that things are asking or working now in modern American politics, you would not know that. You would see that they are doing everything in their power to try and belittle the Constitution and the rights that are protected thereunder. It is truly what must be done in order to maintain the proper tenets of federalism. You see, one of the greatest fears that our founding fathers had in the anti-federalist movement was that the several states or the state governments would be reduced to a subservient position, with the centralized government becoming all-powerful, all-encompassing with its power in a way that was never originally intended by the framers of the Constitution, which is that sect of our founding fathers that penned that glorious document that is the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. They realized that the natural state of governments is to move forth to diametrically oppose the rights and sovereignty of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And what that film displays, even though, yes, it is a bit questionable with signs that have vulgarity, such as the F word on it, it does show that the university has a policy and position, irrespective of what the language may be, to try and curtail or clamp down on freedom of expression. Look, one of the things that is required to be a well-rounded individual, one who is capable of engaging freely in the free marketplace of ideas, is to be able to face that type of speech you find oppressive. In fact, the entire purpose behind the freedom of expression, which is contained within the four corners of the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, is to protect that sort of speech that many might find inappropriate, lewd, or sickening. And of course, what it literally tells us is that there is this push, a demonstrable push, in fact, by the pillars of power and authority to try and trample upon the fundamental and inalienable rights of the citizens that were endowed to them by their Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. But again, I want to go back to this video and just play a little bit more, because again, it shows us that what we're facing in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours is this push to try and again strip and deprive us of these rights, and all to do what? To have great exchanges of ideas, to feel comfortable, to not be offended. Again, these are those twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism hard at work.
Which is restrained by the Bill of Rights. Just so I understand the chain of command here.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Then my argument stands still. We can argue this all you want.
We can argue this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
If I find you're a violation of college rules and regulations, I'm going to have you remove the signs. If you refuse to remove the signs, I'm going to have you arrested.
Really? You're having me arrested? Okay.
Okay.
Like, where's the line drawn?
We do have a policy on campus.
Okay.
Demonstrations, any form of demonstration.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to determine whether you're in violation of that rule and regulation of any type of demonstration on campus.
Okay.
If we feel as though it's in violation of that, we're going to have the signs removed.
Okay.
Okay. That's really what it is.
So
you can't on the college campus. You can't put signs anywhere you want to put them.
Right.
Okay. You're not just not allowed to do it. I can't do it. You can't do it. He can't do it. They can't do it.
Right.
You just can't do that.
Now.
Okay. As per the college policies and procedures, this is actually a demonstration. Okay. Your cause is free speech.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So therefore, you need approval from the college. any type of demonstration. Because a demonstration is defined as a public display of a group or individual positioned for or against a person or cause.
Okay.
For free speech.
Right.
Right? That's a cause.
Okay.
Okay. Therefore, requires advance approval of college. You don't have advance approval, so this is an unauthorized demonstration at this point in time.
Okay.
So we're asking you to pick up your stuff and leave.
Okay, now let me ask you this. If I were to pack up my signs that have F words on them, and I put I have a blank one right there folded up.
No, it's still free speech. It's
so you're saying in general? I'm just making sure I understand.
No, absolutely.
So everything has to be packed up.
I want you to be clear.
So everything packed up and I gotta go, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to pack up every single sign and leave campus. Just so I understand.
Yeah, you just can't do. This is a demonstration.
Yes.
You're for a cause.
Yes.
You need private approval to do any demonstration for a cause, for or against any cause.
So you're saying if I wanted to stay here, I'd have to go ask for approval.
That is correct.
Okay, so you're saying as of right now, since I don't have their approval, I have to leave.
That is correct.
Got it. Can I have my copy, please?
So you got a copy of him,
Thank you, gentlemen.
So there you have it. There you have what they were saying. It takes away the argument that they would normally have, that it's not the signs so much. If you recall, that's what the officer said in the first part of the clip I played. It's this idea, this notion that it's any type of free speech display on campus is something that requires permission, except that wouldn't that then say that all of the professors have to do the same thing? But no, that's not the way it works. It's not equally applied. And again, students can congregate on campus. That's part of what a campus is for. It's for the free exchange of ideas. And what they're trying to do there is to utilize the rules in such a way as to change the meaning of them. It would be one thing if it was just an outsider who wasn't a student at the university to have to go and get permission, but those who are paying tuition to attend the university should have an ability to speak their mind freely. That is part of the whole idea of why you pay for education. And then on top of that, with the astronomical education rates and tuition rates that are out there, I think it's damn near criminal that they are applying this in such a way. Now, that's not to say that I believe that campus should be disruptive. And that does not mean that I think you should be able to go out there just willy-nilly with these sorts of offensive signs just full of vulgarity. That's part of the same type of disagreement or opposition that I have to Donald Trump's candidacy for the White House. Is the vulgarity that he's used, is the way that he has gone into personalized ad hominem attacks as opposed to engaging in the marketplace of ideas. But by the admission of campus security there, or the campus police there, they were saying that it doesn't matter. You have to get permission. But again, where does this leave us? Where does it lead when we are being deprived of the ability to speak and think and freely associate? It really goes against our entire system of education, our entire system of government, the ability to petition the government for a redress of grievances. These sorts of things must be considered in point of fact. And part of the problem that we're facing right now as I sit here and speak into this microphone is that we have lost touch with that. There has been just far too much obfuscation on the left and allowing and peddling this sort of slanted, selectively enforced drivel that it does make it difficult to understand where the line is. They try and make the law as difficult to comprehend as possible, thereby making it much easier to silence and suppress people. Because one of the favorite lines of those that push for an absolutist, statist type of system is that ignorance of the law is no defense. Well, then, the plain applicability of the law has to apply as well. And of course, the key to this can be found within the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. think back to one of the Bill of Rights or first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution as being the 8th Amendment. It is that which prohibits the unreasonable or cruel and unusual punishment. And I think that we are beginning to enter into that territory, particularly when they said that they would arrest him just for refusing to comply with a college ordinance. When did we give colleges the power to have legislative authority? When we look at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, we see quite clearly that it is only the legislative branch of government that is allowed to do that. And that the same holds true with the constitutions of the several states. And that is truly a sickening thing to see, that we are allowing these institutions to engage in that sort of chicanery. It is an affront to our fundamental and inalienable rights. Recall that each and every one of us, by our blessing of being a United States citizen, whether we be natural born or naturalized, is that we are endowed by our Creator with certain fundamental and inalienable rights. And in the Declaration of Independence, those rights were listed as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, the liberty aspect of this is being severely curtailed, and that was expanded upon by the protections that were included in the Bill of Rights. You see, the great debate that was waged between the Federalist and anti-Federalist movements in the early part of American history was over whether the government would be able to step upon or abridge or encroach upon the rights of the people. It was the fear of the anti-federalists that the federal government, by its nature and by the way that governments have traditionally acted throughout the course of human events, would eventually encroach upon the rights of the popular sovereigns and of the state governments. The Federalists argued that you didn't need a Bill of Rights to protect it, and their fear was that the Bill of Rights would be utilized in such a way as to encroach upon or abridge the rights of other individuals. So there was a great compromise that was reached before the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our United States Constitution, was ratified in December of 1791. That compromise was, one, there would be a Bill of Rights, but the 9th and 10th Amendments would be included to ensure that the rights would not be utilized in such a way as to strip or deprive other citizens of their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. This is the beauty of our system. It shows what intellectual and proper civil discourse can bring about. And that shows us that there has to be a free exchange of ideas. That is what is necessary to achieve the thing that Sam Adams told us to be, which was a virtuous republic. And that requires that we be open-minded. It requires that we also be willing to question those who are doing everything in their power to try and strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And that is really going to be important. And what we must do is come together and work together to try and keep our nation free. That we have to be ready, willing, and able to take the steps that are necessary to ensure that our freedoms and liberties are passed down to posterity. Because, again, when you look at the beautiful and poetic language contained within the preamble to our shared United States Constitution, you see that our founding fathers expected us to hand this down to posterity, meaning that it must be applicable at all times, that the nation is free and operating as they originally intended for it to do so. And it brings up that story of Benjamin Franklin that we have told on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Shortly after the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention, a young woman ran up to Benjamin Franklin and asked, Mr. Franklin, what is it you have given us? In his infinite sagacity and wisdom and foresight, it was that he said, "We have given you a republic if you can keep it." Now, what he meant by that was that the founding fathers had developed a constitutionally endowed, federalist, representative, republican form of government, and that it was the duty, obligation, but above all, responsibility of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing republic of ours, we the people, to proactively maintain and safeguard those rights. That is what our goal here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is. We are seeking to guide you to that, to allow you to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. We will never deviate from that course of action or from that plan, because we want you to be empowered. We want you to be able to put your foot down and say no when the government becomes rogue, tyrannical, and ultimately illegitimate. Now, with that said, it is time to send the flight attendant back for the last round of alcohol as we begin our descent. As always, folks, she is not going to tell you you can't say what you want to. She's just there to pour you some alcohol. I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page, or indeed even our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will also find the Blogspot account where we put up audio-only versions of our state-of-the-art radio program. And then there is the Cafe Press account, where we have all sorts of trinkets and goodies, from hats, binders, laptop sleeves, tote bags, drinking glasses, shot glasses, you name it, shoes, anything with our first-class passenger logo or our traditional Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo, at reasonable prices. And with such a wide array of products, you're bound to find whatever you're looking for there, and give us a little bit of support. I'm also including the link to our Cafe Press account in the description of this show. As always, folks, thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We will see you again next time. Please do take care.